What's going on, everybody? You back with Sweet Science here on the air. I'm not going to do a long video today. I just want to touch on a welterweight subject today. I want to touch on the whole issue of Bud versus Spence. For those of you that don't know, Terrance Crawford versus Errol Spence Jr. And the reasons why we haven't got that fight yet. And if we'll get that fight, and if and when that fight happens, who my pick is. So, again, man, you rocking with Sweet Science here on the air. Subscribe to the channel, Sweet Science 702. Make sure you hit the bell icon to get all your post notifications. So, you know, it's an interesting time in boxing right now. I definitely think it's a great time in boxing. Boxing has got a new breath of life. And it seems like boxing is back on the world stage. And so with that being said, man, I want to talk about Bud versus Spence today. And the reasons why that fight hasn't happened yet and what I think will happen if and when that fight does happen. Now, Bud's not naturally a welterweight. You know, Bud unified the division when he was at 140 pounds. And I got to say, right now, I still think, even though he hasn't done much at 147, right now, I probably still got Bud as the pound for pound. Now, Bud unified 140, which is great. That is a phenomenal feat. You know, he fought some good opposition, and he unified 140. And, you know, a lot of the guys at 147 acted like he was nobody. They try to ignore him. They do that to, like, you know, people like Wilder, people like Errol Spence, you know, just guys that seem like threats, like Jamel Charlo. Guys that they really know are threats. They use excuses like who is he fought to get the big names, but the big names go out and fight bums who are nobodies. So, you know, Bud moving up to 147, they try to play him, talking about he don't have a belt. When you get a belt, what have you done at 147? Which, what have you done at 147 is a legitimate question. You know, you haven't done anything at 147. So Bud moved up. He fought Jeff Horn in his first fight at 147 and got a belt in his first fight at 147. Now, there is a strange connection between Bob Arum and the WBO belt. Some say it stands for whatever Bob orders, which very well could be possible since he promised Lomachenko a belt in just his second or third professional fight. How you could promise someone a title shot at a specific belt in their second or third professional fight, that's beyond me, you know. But then again, I'm not a boxing promoter, so I don't know. But they say WBO stands for whatever Bob orders. So Bud comes up to 147. He beats Horn. He gets that WBO belt. Ironically, he signed to Bob Arum. He gets the WBO belt by beating up Jeff Horn, and it's sort of been a run-of-the-mill for that since then, because what else? And I love Terrance Crawford, you know what I'm saying? I think he's an exceptional and a phenomenal fighter, but since the Jeff Horn fight, what has Terrance Crawford did at 147? He beat a washed-up Amir Khan in his last fight versus Kalvanakis, or whatever that dude's name is. He got dropped. You know, Bud hasn't really done anything at 147, and he's not even naturally that weight, you know what I'm saying? And he acting like he don't want to fight Sean Porter, when I think that would be his best course of action at this point. That'll get him one step closer, and everybody talking about the Spence fight even more, which is what I know he really wants, you know. So what he really needs to do is go ahead and just fight Sean Porter. And if he can handle Sean Porter easier than Errol did, that'll tell us all we need to know. And that'll probably create a more push for the Bud Spence fight, you know. So I would like to see him fight Sean Porter. I think that would be a great fight. I'd have to give it to, I think I would go with Bud on that. Probably by decision, because ain't nobody knocking Sean Porter out. So Bud probably by decision. And now, as far as 147 on the Errol Spence side of things, on the other side of the street, as they say, Spence has been a dog for a long time. You know, he went over there and took the belt from Kell Brook that Kell Brook took from Sean Porter. He took that belt from Kell Brook, convincingly broke the man's eye socket in his own backyard, you know, over there in the UK. Beat his ass. So he did that, took his belt. You know, and he had the IBF belt since, and then, you know, him unifying with Shawn Porter, getting his hands on the WBC belt, is no surprise. I mean, he took the belt from the guy that took the belt from Shawn. But on that same note, just a little disclaimer, I feel like when I watch, because I've watched it a few times, the Errol Spence Jr. Shawn Porter fight, I actually was going with Errol by knockout, but I feel like Shawn Porter actually edged that fight, even with the knockdown. I feel like he still edged that fight, or if anything, it should have been a draw. So I feel like they might have robbed Shawn Porter that WBC belt, but I mean, you know, shit happens. It's boxing, you know what I'm saying? So at 147, Errol Spence was the boogeyman. They tried to keep him locked out like Wilder and stuff like that, or like Rigondeaux and stuff like that for a long time, but he broke his way in by getting you know, the proper fights and staying busy and staying active. And that Mikey Garcia fight helped him out a lot. Now, I know that, you know, Mikey Garcia came up a weight class or two, so I'm not really giving Errol a parade of credit for that win. But at the same time, you have to keep in mind that he didn't call for that fight. Mikey Garcia called Errol out. You know what I'm saying? So it's not the same thing. If you call me out and I decide to beat your ass, that's not my fault. That's your fault, because you should have been calling me out if you wasn't ready for that. So I don't want to hear people talking about Mikey Garcia this, Mikey Garcia that. He called for that fight. Errol wasn't looking for him, you know. So that was a wash. He washed Mikey clean, you know, and then did the unification with Shawn, into which I feel like Shawn won that. I feel like he should have got at least a draw, or a split decision. But you know, it is what it is. They went with Errol. So now Errol's a unified champ. Now we get into, can Errol unify with either Pacquiao, whom of which I don't think is going to fight Errol Spence Jr. I highly doubt he has that in his agenda. Or Bud. You know, Errol said he wants all the belts and he wants to clean out the division. Well, the other two guys that got belts is Manny Pacquiao and Terrance Crawford. Terrance Crawford's willing to fight him, and now that we've seen that Wilder Fury has been made by Bob Arum in Top Rank with Al Heyman and the PBC, even with Frank Warren in there, there's no reason that we can't make these fights when these guys are all on opposite sides of the streets, because Wilder and Fury are heavyweights, so they're on the ultimate opposite sides of the street. We were able to make that happen, and I think Bud and Spence will be a super fight. You know, I think their gate would be, you know, close to what Wilder and Fury just did. You know, so I would like to see that fight. Now, my prediction, I feel like if Bud fights Spence, it all depends on Bud who wins that fight. I think if Bud decides he doesn't want to mix it up with Spence, then I think that Bud could definitely edge him on points. I think that's very possible. I don't think that that's illogical or that's unreasonable to think. Now, if Bud decides that he wants to mix it up and try to get into shootouts with Errol Spence, he could get smoked. You get in the shootouts, you get smoked. So it could be an early night, a short night, if he decides he want to get into a shootout with Spence. So I think it all depends on Bud who wins that fight. Now, what I think, if I could try to predict what I think Bud would actually do, I think at some point he would try to get into a shootout. So I still don't see him getting knocked out, probably knocked down. So I will have to go with Bud. I think Bud will edge that on points. I think it will be a 12-round fight, and I think Terrance Crawford will win that in a decision. Terrance Crawford versus Errol Spence. But anyway, man, I just wanted to hit y'all with my prediction, and you know, a fight we all looking forward to today with Terrance Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. And again, you rocking with Sweet Science, join the air. Subscribe to the channel, Sweet Science 702, and I'm out.